All right, I will say good morning. Let us begin with a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for Adar Aleph, Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this month in memory of Paul's parents, Zechariah Ben Zechariah and Dinah Bas Rabdov. To thank Art and Sherry Miller for dedicating the Sherman this month in loving memory of Art's brother Richard Miller, Reuven Ben Betzalel V'Rachel. And to thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Ayal Steinberg for the refua sheleimah of Shulamis Bas Susha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of those who need a refua will have them together with Kol Cholei Yisrael, and the Neshamas who have left us should have an aliyah and their families a nechama. And also with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Chof Vav 26, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem. We left off on Chof Hamid Beis. We covered a lot of ground yesterday, not all of it on the daf, but Baruch Hashem. So also we left off yesterday. Kinach Nafshay Rabbi Zera. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines up from the bottom. Kinach Nafshay Rabbi Zera. When Rabbi Zera passed away, Pasach Alehu Sabdana. So again, a particular eulogizer began to eulogize him and said as follows: Eretz Shinar Hara V'Yolda. So the land of Shinar is a reference to Bavel. The land of Shinar, literally again begat and birthed Rabbi Zera. Eretz Tzvi Gidla Shashuah. The land of Eretz Tzvi is a reference to Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael literally again nurtured and allowed this young man to grow up and become a delight. Oy na la amra Rekes ki avda kli chandasa. Rekes said, woe to us, for we have lost the utensil of our beauty. Rekes, Rashi says, is Tiveria. Eretz Yisrael. We'll say beautiful. Kinach nafshid Rabbi Avo. Rabbi Avo passed away. Achisu amudid de kesari maya. So we'll say this is incredible. The Gemara now records a number of times where supernatural events occurred as a result of great people passing away. So for example, the Gemara says when Rabbi Avo passed away, the columns of Caesarea began to issue forth water. Like the columns themselves began to cry. When Rabbi Yossi passed away, Shafu Marzeve de Tzipori Dama. Literally again, the gutters of Tzipori began to issue forth blood. Rabbi Yaakov Aschamiu Kolchave Biyamama. Sorry. For when Rabbi Yaakov passed away, the stars came out during the day. Rabbi Asi Iakru Kol Ilani. When Rabbi Asi passed away, all of the trees were uprooted. Rabbi Chia Nachisu Kipe Dinura Merakia. When Rabbi Chia passed away, Rashi points out over Kipuri Dinura Avanim Shalor. Fiery stones descended from the heavens. Rabbi Menachem Ishto Sal Menaya Vahavu Lemechal Tsaya. This is very interesting. Rabbi Menachem passed away. All of the graven images on coins, right, became flattened. Right, all of the images on the coins were obliterated, and the coins themselves became flattened pieces of metal. So Rabbi Tanchum Barchia is katzatzu kol indartia. When Rabbi Tanchum passed away, indartia were the statues of the kings. All of the statues of the kings ultimately were uprooted. Rabbi Yashiv ichasru shivin machtara ben Arda. This is very interesting. When Rabbi Yashiv passed away, there were 70 thefts in Narda in one day, just like Baltimore, right? So there was the idea over here. The idea over here says the Gemara is that Rabbi Yashiv. Rashi points out that Rabbi Yashiv's schus kept the thieves at bay. When he passed away, there were 70 thefts in that one day. I will say again, not for today. Obviously, each of these events correspond to some element in these great men's lives. Now, these are not just haphazard events. Each of them, again, somehow reflect the greatness of the individual. Hamnuna, Nachisu Kipi Debar Damirakia. When Rav Hamnuna passed away, so hail came down from the heavens. The Rav Yosef, when Rav Yosef passed away, Noshuk Kipi Depras Ahadodi. Literally, again, the arches of the bridge that extended over the river Pras, the Euphrates, the arches literally again kissed each other, which means the arches began to collapse. Abai v'Rava noshe kipi diglas ahadodi. When Abai and Rava passed away, again, the arches of the bridge over Diglas began literally again to kiss one another, began to collapse as well. Kinach nafshet Misharshia, ton digli shitzi. Ultimately, when Misharshia passed away, the palm trees began to sprout forth thorns. Incredible. Bosai Torah bottom. The Gemara goes back a little bit to Halacha. Torah bottom, top of Chavav. Ve'elu kran she'in misachim. So Bosai, now the Gemara talks about, again, we've begun to see in Halacha already that there are certain times where when you rip a garment, you could go ahead and repair it, and other times that you can't repair it. So the Mishnah says, the Gemara says over here, Ve'elu kran, these are times that you tear, that you are not allowed to repair the tear. Now, misachim is a lashon of complete repair. So these are tears you cannot do a complete repair. Hakore al aviv v'imo, when one tears his garment for his mother and his father. Va'al rabo shelimdo Torah. Both say one is obligated to tear kriya for a Rebbe that teaches him Torah. Both say now this is interesting. Even if this is not rabo shelimdo rubo shel Torah, right? In other words, there's a special status that is accorded to one's Rebbe, where that Rebbe taught you the majority of your Torah. But again, a Rebbe who teaches you some significant amount of Torah, one is Chayiv for Kriya. Va'al Nasi, we saw the Nasi, Al Av Bezdin, V'al Shmuel's Haros. You're also obligated to tear your clothing for when you hear about terrible things. V'al Birkas Hashem, and ultimately when you hear someone Chas V'Shalom curse Hashem, you're also obligated to tear your clothing. V'al Sefer Torah Shenisraf. And about a Sefer Torah that is burnt as well, or Sefer Torah that is destroyed, one is also obligated to go ahead and tear Kriya. V'al Ari Yehuda, v'al HaMikdash, v'al Yerushalayim. And when you see Ari Yehuda, the cities of Yehuda in a state of destruction, the Beis HaMikdash in a state of destruction, and Yerushalayim in a state of destruction, one is obligated to go ahead and tear Kriya. V'korea al Mikdash. Now, boss, an interesting halacha here. You could, when you tear for the Beis Hamikdash, Mosif al Yerushalayim. So, this is interesting halacha. If let's say you first tore, you saw the Makom Hamikdash, right, and you saw again the Beis Hamikdash in a state of ruin, which it currently is in. It should be rebuilt Mehira B'Yameinu. But a person sees the Beis Hamikdash in a state of ruin, they tear their clothing. One could go ahead and extend that tear, that same tear, for the rest of Yerushalayim. Aviv v'imo v'rabo shalom. So now the Gemara is going to go through this list. Now this is the Braisa, talks about all the situations in which a person goes ahead and tears. Now we're going to go ahead and go through the list. It says the Gemara, Aviv v'imo v'rabo shalom, the Torah minalan, for your father and your mother and your Rebbe who taught you Torah. How do you know that you're obligated to tear your clothing? The Chsiv, this is actually incredible. Ve'elisha ra v'hu mitzaik avi recha b'yisrael parashav. So we'll say, so this is talking about again the episode in Malachim Beis when Eliyahu Hanavi is taken up to Shemaim. Remember again, Eliyahu Hanavi doesn't die, as the Gemara is going to discuss in just a moment. But instead, he's taken up to the heavens in a fiery chariot. He's walking with his student Elisha when this event occurs. So Elisha's response to this event is he calls out and he says, Avi, Avi, my father, chariot of Israel. So the Gemara says, Avi, Avi, ze aviv v'imo. So we'll say, now the end of this pasuk is that Elisha tore his clothing. That's the end of the pasuk. So the Gemara learns out a lot of the concepts of kriya from this particular pasuk. So Avi, Avi, that refers to one's father and one's mother. Avi, Avi, ze aviv v'imo. Recha v'yisrael farashav, ze rabo shelimdo Torah. So we'll say, what does it mean when he says the chariot of Israel, right, and its riders? This refers ultimately to one's Rebbe. So the Gemara says, okay, Avi, Avi, I hear that could refer to parents. Ultimately, again, how does chariot of Israel refer to one's Rebbe? My mashma, Kidimatakim Rav Yosef, Rabbi, that what Elisha was saying was as follows. Eliyahu, you were my Rebbe, the Tav Lahomi Yisrael B'Tzalusei, Mersichin Uparashim. Your tfilos were more beneficial to Klal Yisrael than all of the chariots and its riders. Just like the chariots protect an empire, right? The army protects a nation. So Elisha was crying out and he was saying, Eliyahu, your tfilos were as beneficial to Klal Yisrael ultimately again as a standing army is for a regular nation. So therefore, again, I'll say, interestingly enough, this pasuk, right, by Elisha is the makar for tearing kriya so far for one's parents as well as for one's Rebbe. Now remember, the next halacha was that when you tear your clothing for your parents or for one's Rebbe, that tear is never repaired. That tear is never repaired. So how do we know that? Because it will say the same pasuk by Elisha says, he took hold of his clothing, vayikar'im l'shnayim kroim, and he tore it into two tears, or into two parts. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. And the Gemara says, vayikar'im l'shnayim kroim, imasha shneimar vayikarim. Once it says that he tore it, ein yodeh shel so we'll say it's redundant. Once he told me he tore it, by definition, tore it means what? It's in two parts. Alamalamed shekruim va'omdim l'shnayim li'olam. Rather, what the pasuk is teaching me is like this: you tear it, and after you tear it, it is to remain in two parts forever. I.e., the tear that one makes for their parent and for their parents and for one's Rebbe is a tear that is never repaired. Incredible. Amalei Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. So you're supposed to Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. I don't understand. Eliyahu Chayhu, but Eliyahu never died. Eliyahu never died. How are you learning out the halachos of kriya for someone who passed away from someone who never passed away? Eliyahu is alive. So the Gemara says, Amalei Kevan Dichsiv Lo Ra'ahu Od Legabe Didei Kemes Dami. Now I will say, but remember again, since Elisha never saw Eliyahu again, for Elisha, it was as if his Rebbe died. Which I will say, I just want to point out something really incredible, because this Gemara also captures a profound dynamic of death in general. See, I will say, we believe in Olam Haba. Which means that when a person leaves this world, they're very much alive. They're just alive in a different world. They're just alive in a different dimension. They're just alive in a different place, which is an incredible yesod. So what's the pain of death? The pain of death is I'm not going to see my loved one. That's supposed to. This is what we saw in yesterday's daf. Remember again, I will say perhaps one of the most profound lines: "Bachu la'avelim v'lo la'aveda." Right? Cry for the avelim. Do not cry for the one who is lost. Shehi lemenucha va'anu la'anacha. For the soul is at rest. The soul is very much alive. We are the ones who are in pain. Rabbi said that was Chafi Yamim Beis. We just had in yesterday's daf such a profound yesod. The pain of death that we experience is not a pain for the neshama. It's not the pain for the person who passed away. We believe in Olam Haba. We believe that the neshama goes to an incredible place where it's close to the Shekhinah. We believe that Olam Haba has no pain, has no suffering, has no difficulty, has no sadness. So our pain is not for the neshama. So we'll say the whole yesod of Avelos is I'm not going to get to see my loved one. That's the whole pain of the dynamic. So the Gemara says over here, you're right, Eliyahu is alive, but Elisha is never going to see him. So what's the dynamic of death? The dynamic of death is I had someone who I loved very much, and I'm never going to get to see them again in this world. That's the dynamic of death. And that's why Elisha mourned. So the Gemara says, since Elisha was never going to see Eliyahu again, therefore ultimately again, that's the dynamic of death. And I will say it's so incredibly important. This is why, by the way, that Judaism halacha does have limitations on excessive mourning, right? There are limitations even on the way that we mourn, and even on certain things that we're allowed to say over the course of mourning. Because the danger of excessive mourning is that it runs the risk of denying one's belief in Olam Haba, and denying one's belief in what we saw before. Don't cry for the neshama. I cry for myself. But if I really believe in Olam Haba, then ultimately, again, that leads to a measured response to death, a measured form of mourning. So the Gemara goes weiter. Nasi va'av bezdin, u'shmuos ra'os milah. I'll say, okay, so now we're going through the list. So now we've established through Eliyahu, that you do kriya for a father, for a mother, and for a rebbe. What about a nasi? Av Bezdin Ushmuos Ros. Where do we know that from? Listen to this. Vaychazek David bebegadav vaykarem v'gam kol ha'anoshim asher ito vayispedu vayifku vayatsumu ad ha'erev al Shaul v'al Yonas Hashem Excuse me. V'al am Hashem, v'al beis Yisrael, ki naflu b'charev. So also listen to this, another episode in Navi. This is after Shaul's still king. Shaul and Yonasan go out to war against the Plishtim, and they are defeated. But not just defeated, Shaul's killed in the battle, Yonasan is killed in the battle, so the king is killed, his son is killed, many members of Am Yisrael are killed. David HaMelech hears about this tragedy, and what does he do? He goes out and he tears his clothing. So watch this. Says the Gemara, Shaul Zed Nasi. Shabbos says, remember again, Shaul was the king. So the king is the Nasi. When the head of the Jewish people dies, there's an obligation to go ahead and tear Kriya. Yonasan, we'll say first to the widest line, Yonasan Ze'av Bezdin. Yonasan refers to the Av Bezdin. We'll say, so again, just kind of in the hierarchy of the leadership of Klal Yisrael, you have the Nasi. So the Nasi, we'll say, when there's a Melech, the Melech is the Nasi. When there's not a Melech, the Nasi is the de facto leader of the Jewish people. The Av Bezdin is kind of like the religious head of the Jewish people. That was Yonasan. Al Am Hashem v'al Beis Yisrael. About Am Hashem and Beis Yisrael. Now remember again, with David and with Yonasan, many Jews also died. Elu Shmuel Saros. This refers to terrible tidings, right? Terrible news. When you hear about terrible things that happened, one is chayiv to go ahead and tear kriya. Amalei Rav Bar Shvaler of Kahana. Ve'ima ad dahavakulu. Well, maybe from the pasuk, the only time you're chayiv to tear kriya is when what? All of these things occur. Maybe it's only if there's the death of the Nasi, the Av Bezdin, and Shmuel. So because also remember again, Rachmana Litzlan, all of these things are happening in one pasuk. Amrale al hifsik. If you look at the way the structure is, the pasuk is structured, the pasuk says they went ahead and they tore their clothing, they eulogized, they cried and they fasted. Al Shaul, v'al Yonasan, v'al. So the Gemara says the va'al terms goes in and separates each one to say, yes, unfortunately, all of these tragedies occurred concurrently for Klal Yisrael in this moment, but one would tear kriya for any one of these tragedies independently. So the Gemara says, Umi karinan ashmuel zaros, and the both say, ultimately again, do we go ahead and tear kriya for terrible news, for Shmuel Suros? So also listen to this. Vaha amrulei l'Shmuel katal shavur malka treser alfe Yehudai b'mezigas Kesari. But one time they told Shmuel that Shavur Malka was King Shapur was one of the Persian kings. That King Shavur Malka killed 12,000 Jews on the outskirts. I should say, but Mezigas Kesari. Mezigas Kesari was a city. Velo Kara, and ultimately again Shmuel did not tear kriya. So that seems to be Shmuel's rose. So the Gemara says, Lo amru ella berov tzibur ukimaise shahaya. Ultimately, we'll say the only time that there is an obligation to go ahead and tear kriya is when something impacts shmua ra'ah that impacts the majority of Klal Yisrael. So I will say, as terrible as this tragedy was, that King Shapur killed 12,000 Jews, it was not a majority of Klal Yisrael, and therefore one is not obligated to go out and tear kriya. To which the Gemara says, Umi katol Shapur malka Yudai, did King Shapur kill Jews? I will say, listen to this Gemara. We're in the widest lines, 4 lines, and I will say, this is an incredible Gemara. Vaha amar le shavar malka l'Shmuel. King Shapur once said to Shmuel, Tisili, give me a shkoyach, de lo katli Yehudi mi'olam. Give me a shkoyach, I never killed any Jews. So I will say, you hear this? The King Shapur said, really, you should make me a kiddush. You should make me a kiddush. Why? I never killed Jews. I will say, it's important to understand something. And it's a difficult lesson for us to understand. We'll say, when Chazal tell us something like this, because when the Jew lives in the diaspora, the greatest shkoyach sometimes you could expect from our Gentile neighbors is that they don't kill us. We'll say, it's very important to understand that Esav soneas Yaakov. Esav soneas Yaakov. And the nations of the world do not like us. They do not like us. And we delude ourselves and we fool ourselves when we think that they do. And we think that they're our brothers and we're theirs. We're happy to be anybody's brother. But the nations of the world never, and will never reciprocate that towards us. And it's important to understand this, because the moment we delude ourselves into thinking that we're one of the guys, right, that we're one of the chevra, that we're loved and respected like everyone else, it always has the most disastrous effects for Klal Yisrael. We are charged with being productive members of whatever society we live in, including diaspora society. But we always live with our guard up, because at the end of the day, we are never one of the nations. We're supposed to say, and again, all you need to do is to go ahead and look around the world and what's happening. It's everywhere, and it's Baruch Hashem B'Tzaharayim, and it's almost as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for some reason, always feels the need to remind us of this. Whether you look at the uptick in anti-Semitism in this country, or you look at just, again, Amnesty International's report just last week. And again, yes, we have wonderful, I will say, and it's so important, we have wonderful organizations that do great advocacy. Things that I will say, just on this thing, you know how advocacy works. You know how it works, right? I'm on your side as long as you do for me, right? Keep holding the meetings, keep raising them out. Yeah, sure, we're best friends. Let's say, let's be honest about the way things work, right? The Jew only has fair weather friends. And it's so important to understand it, because the moment we recognize that the only people we have to depend upon is HaKadosh Baruch Hu and each other, the stronger we are in this world. King Shapur goes over to Shmuel and he says, give me a shkoyach. I never killed any Jews. What? Listen, can you imagine a statement like that? I'm not a racist. I never killed anyone of color. Can you imagine? Can you imagine somebody say a thing like that? Ridiculous. By the Jew, it actually says, yeah, wow, what a good guy. What a good guy. He never killed anyone. Absolutely incredible. Never killed any Jews. I would say it's so important for us to always recognize our place in this world, and to recognize Ein lanu amil hisha'in ela alavinu shabashamayim. We exist because of our achdus with one another, and we exist because of our alliance with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Gemara says, but one second, how can you say King Shapur never went ahead and killed any Jews? He just killed 12,000 Jews in Mizigasi Kesari. Hasam inhu garmilin afshayim. No. There, I'll say, okay, there's another story. Those Jews rebelled against King Shapur. They launched a rebellion. So Rabbi Ami lakol yisri de Mizigas Kesari paka shur del dukya. So I'll say, so again, they launched a rebellion. Literally, it means because of the harp strings that they played music during the rebellion, the walls of Lutkia came down. The idea being those Jews rebelled. Okay, so if you rebel against the monarch, bad stuff is going to happen. He didn't kill them because they were Jews. He killed them ultimately, again, because they rebelled. Al Birkas Hashem Yinal says, so now again, we're going through our list. So now we have father, mother, Nasi, Av Bezdin, Shmuel's Ros. So let's listen to this. Al Birkas Hashem. What about if you hear someone curse Hashem? Minol Chas V'Shalom D'Chsiv Vayovo El Yokim Ben Chilkiah Asher Al Abayis V'Shevna HaSofer V'Yoach Ben Asaf HaMaskel Chizkiyo Krue Begadim. So we'll say this is an interesting episode. So what happens? All of these individuals come before Chizkiyo with their clothing torn. So what's happening over here? Okay, well, fine. We'll turn it up on. So again, they had all just heard Paro go ahead and curse HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore, again, the Navi's on saying they came before Chizkiah having torn their clothing, because unfortunately they just heard someone curse the Ribono Shel Olam. So turn Rabbanon, Echad Hashomeya, Ve'echad Hashomeya, Mipi Hashomeya. Shabbos says, listen to this. One who hears someone go ahead and curse Hashem, and one who hears from someone who heard. In other words, they're both saying, so what the Gemara is adding on over is as follows. If you hear the actual cursing, chas v'shalom, or you hear from someone who heard, right? So the halacha is chayiv the kroa. Ultimately, one is obligated to tear their clothing. Edim einon chayav on the kroa, shekvar karo b'shasha shamu. So the Gemara says, but however, the Eidim, in other words, if witnesses come along to retell that which occurred, so the witnesses are not obligated to go ahead and tear again when they retell what they heard, because they already tore when they heard about the cursing the first time. To which the Gemara says, so I don't understand. They should be obligated to re-tear when they go ahead and tell over the story of the cursing again. To which the Gemara says, Lo sagalaitcha dichsiv, vahikishmo hamelech Chizkiyo, vayikra es begadav. So I will say the pasuk says that when they told Chizkiyo about the blasphemy, about the cursing of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chizkiyo heard and he tore his clothing. Hamelech kara vehem lo karu. Ultimately, again, it shows you that what the king tore, but the witnesses who told over the testimony, they did not tear. Vehem lo karu. So the Gemara says, "V'lo mesachim inan." So I will say, now we've gone through the list. How do you know that these tears are not mended? So the Gemara says, Asya kriya, make a gzer shava of kriya. Good. Sefer Torah shenisraf min al. Say, how do you know chas v'shalom if you see a Sefer Torah that is burned, that one is obligated to go and tear kriya? T'chsiv, we'll say, listen to this fascinating story. Vahi kikra Yehudi, shalosh talasos v'arba, vayikar'eh b'tar ha'sofer, v'hashtech el ha'eish asher al ha'ach. So we'll say, listen to the story over here. The Gemara is telling a story. The Gemara is telling a story that occurred in Sefer Yirmiyahu. So we're going to see over here that what happened over here is, well, we'll see the whole story, but literally translated, it means, and he read before him 3 psukim or 4 psukim. He cut with a razor or with a sharp knife of the sofer, cut out the names of Hashem and threw it into the oven. What are we talking for? Fireplace, I should say. What are we talking about? My shalosh talasos va'arba. So we'll say, here we go. Amr le'Yehoyakim. So it said to Yehoyakim, Kasav Yirmiyah Sefer Kinnis. Yirmiyahu has written Sefer Kinnis. Now both say, Yirmiyahu wrote Kinnis even before the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Right? Rashi points out over here, well actually we'll see later on, that Yirmiyahu wrote Kinnis because he wanted the Jews to see what was going to happen if they don't go ahead and get their act together. The hope was that they would be scared straight by Kinnis. So they bring the Sefer Kinnis to Yehoyakim. So what happens? So Amrle Mak Sivbe. So Yehoyakim says, no, what does it say in the Sefer Kinnis? So it says, Eicha Yoshva Badad. Oh, how the city of Yerushalayim sits desolate, sits all alone. Amrlehu Anamalka. Yehoyakim says, not true. I'm still the king and I'm here. Amrle Bacho Tivkeh Balayla. Right, Yerushalayim will cry out at night. So Yehoyakim says, not true. Ana Malka, I'm the king. Gal say Yehuda Me'oni. Yehuda will be exiled in a state of an impoverished state. Yehoyakim says, Ana Malka. So we'll say, see what's happening over here. Yehoyakim, so arrogant, refuses to believe that which Yirmiyahu is foretelling is going to happen. Darchei Tzion Avelos. Literally, again, the pathways of Tzion will be in a state of mourning. Ana Malka. Yehoyakim says, I am the king, nothing to worry about. Hayu Tsareha Lurosh. Its enemies will become its head, which talks about then the king will be deposed. Amr Lahum Man Amra. Yehoyakim said, who said such a thing like this, that I'll be deposed? Ki Hashem Hoga Aro Pisha'eha. It was Hashem who said it. But say, get ready for this. What did Yehoyakim do? Miyad Kader Kolas Karos Sheba. He cut out the name of Hashem from this scroll that Yirmiyahu wrote. He cut out the name of Hashem, this Sarfan Ba'ish, and he threw the names of God into the fire. And the people who were there did not fear, nor did they tear their clothing. Now, both say that the fact that the Navi faults them for not tearing their clothing tells us that what? Michlal de boile mikri. Tells us they should have torn their clothing. So you see from here, both say that Allah Lamaisa, if you see chas v'shalom, a Sefer Torah, or part of a Sefer Torah burnt, one is obligated to go out and tear kriya. Maybe they should have torn kriya because the shmos ros. Bad news. No, remember, we'll say, at this point in time, nothing actually happened. Right? Yirmiyahu Hanavi was foretelling that which was going to occur, but nothing actually happened yet. Incredible. Listen to this. A person who sees a Sefer Torah that is torn Sefer Torah, is obligated to tear twice. One time for, literally again, the gvil means the margins, right? One time for the parchment and one time for the writing. Because we'll say the pasuk says the king burnt the Megillah and the Dvarim. We'll say, see from here that a sefer has 2 parts. There are the words, and then there's the Megillah. The Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh says something so beautiful. He says, you see from here that there are two dimensions to Torah. There's the part that's written, and there's the unwritten part. Right? There are the words, and then there's a whole other Torah about what the words mean. The words are written, right? The blank pieces of the parchment ultimately are the interpretations, are the shivim part of the Torah. We saw this, if you remember again in Maseches Megillah, that the way a shira is written is Ariach al Gabe Levena, right? The way we write as Yashir, the way we write Vizos HaBracha, ultimately again is lettering on top of empty space. There's a power to that which is written, and there's a power to the empty parchment as well. There's a power to what we know, and there's a power to what we have yet to discover. Such a beautiful imagery. So the Gemara says, therefore, again, when a Sefer Torah is torn, one is chayiv to go ahead and tear two kriyas, one for the writing and one for the parchment. Rabbi Huna, listen to this story. Rabbi Abba and Rav Huna, Barchia, Havu Yosvi. We're sitting together. Kamid Rabbi Abba, boy lafnui. So the Mesorah Sashas tells us Rabbi Abba needed to get up. Boy lafnui. He wanted to get up. He had to relieve himself. So shakle litotafte. He took off his tefillin because they were wearing tefillin the whole day. So he took off his tefillin. Achse abe sajja. He put it down on a cushion. Asoy bas naamisa. So a bas naamisa is a bird. Some bird came along. What? Ostrich, good, right? A bird came along, big bird came along, a big bird came along, right? Big bird came along, right? Baal lemivle, and wanted to swallow the tefillin. As I say, a big bird. Right? I will say, literally, again, it was going to swallow the tefillin. So I'll say, now listen to this. So Rabbi Abba comes back in time. Again, it's not clear. Either again, Rabbi Abba shooed the bird away, or Rav Huna shooed the bird away. Either way, they say the tefillin. Amar hashta ichayv and leish kriyas. Had the bird swallowed the tefillin, I would have been chayiv 2 kriyas. Right? So what we just said, why 2 kriyos? Right? One for the words and one for the parchment. So again, Rav Huna says to him, how do you know that? So the Gemara says, Vaha b'didi hava ovda. So Rav Huna said, one time this happened to me. But it's funny, because you would not think that a story like this would happen twice. Right? But apparently, again, I guess big birds eating tefillin was a common thing. Right? So again, Rav Huna said this, you wouldn't believe this happened to me also. And as Rav Masna, what would be the halacha if the bird swallowed my tefillin? V'lo hava biyadei. Rav Masna didn't know the answer. He'll say, let's listen to this. I then came before Rav Yehuda. V'amrli halchi amar Shmuel lo amru ela bizroa ukimaise shahaya. No. This only means Rabbi say bizroa. Bizroa shen yachol latzio. So it's interesting. Rabbi say, I'll tell you, before I saw Rashi, I thought bizroa meant the only time you're chayiv to go ahead and tear 2 kriyas for a Sefer Torah is when it's torn bizroa. I thought the Pasha Shab bizroa means that when it's torn in an intentional destructive fashion. That when you see someone trying to destroy a Sefer, that's when you're obligated in 2 kriyas. Rashi says no, obviously I'm incorrect. Rashi says bizroa means shen yachol la'atzilo, when you could not have saved it. When you could not have saved it, that's when you're chayiv to go ahead and tear 2 kriyas. But when it could have been saved, like the case of the bird, one would not be chayiv in 2 kriyas. So, all right, we'll say either way, what comes out halacha l'maisa is that if a Sefer Torah is torn, ultimately, again, one would be chayiv 2 kriyas, one for the words and one for the parchment. I'll say, I will point out something very interesting. So you have Rav Huna saying, the same story happened to me, right? I took off my tefillin, I went to the bathroom, I came back, big bird almost, swallowed it, I fought off the bird, I got back my tefillin. So I'll say, if you notice in the story goes, he went to Rav Masna, and he asked Rav Masna the Shaila, and Rav Masna didn't know. We'll say, you look at the Gemara, what do you say to yourself? Why do you have to put that piece of information in there? Or what does it matter? Just get to the end of the story. You went to Rav Yehuda. Ultimately, Rav Yehuda answered your kasha. Why do you have to put in there that Rav Masna did not know? And Abu said, because again, remember, we learned Gemara because Gemara is also our Musar Sefer. Because Abu said, the Gemara is teaching us, it's okay not to know. It's okay not to know. No one knows everything. Sometimes we think that we're supposed to know everything, to the point that we even make stuff up. And I will say, the Gemara Masechah Shabbos says, Lamad Lashon Chalomar Eini Yodea. Teach your tongue to say, I don't know. It's not easy to say, I don't know, because again, we think we should know everything, but it's okay not to know. It's okay not to know. So the Gemara purposely puts in here, Rav Huna went to Rav Masna. Rav Masna, what's the halacha? And Rav Masna said, I don't know. It's okay not to know. I will say, by the way, it's a profound yesod in chinuch also. That sometimes, especially when our children ask us questions, we think that, especially for our children, we're supposed to have all the answers. Sometimes one of the greatest lessons you could teach your children is the ability to say, I don't know. It's a great question. I don't know. Let's learn together. Let's discover together. And again, it teaches a child an incredible yesod in humility, and also it gives them a window into the humanity of their parents, which is incredibly important as well. Gemara goes weiter. Ari Yehuda. So it says, go weiter. So remember again, if you see the cities of Yehuda in a state of destruction, Dechsiv, Vayevo Anoshim Mishchem Mishilo Umishomron, Shmonim Ish Migulache Zakan Ukre Begadim. Umiskodedim, umincha ulevona biadam lahavi beis Hashem. So we'll say, actually, over here, the Gemara is describing the episode in Sefer Yirmiyahu where there are Jews coming to the Beis Hamikdash and they did not realize the Beis Hamikdash was already destroyed. So they're coming with karbanos in hand. They did not realize the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Now they tore their clothing because they had already seen the cities of Yehuda in a state of destruction. They'd already seen the cities of Yehuda in a state of destruction, and therefore, again, they had torn. So from here, you see, so you tear for the cities of Yehuda. Rabbi Chelba, Amra Ula, Bira, Rabbi Lazar will say, if a person sees the cities of Yehuda in a state of destruction, Omer, person says the pasuk from Yeshayahu, Are Katshecha Hayumidbar, Tzion Midbar Haisa, Yerushalayim Shemama. So Ir Katshecha Hayumidbar. So we'll say, your holy cities have become a desert, Vikorea, and you tear. So we'll say that's the halacha when you see the cities of Yehuda in a state of destruction. Yerushalayim Bechorbana, when you see Yerushalayim in a state of destruction, Omer, Tzion Midbar Haisa, Yerushalayim Shemama. Tzion became a midbar, Yerushalayim was laid desolate, Vikorea, and you tear your clothing. Beis Hamikdash Becharbano, when you see the Beis Hamikdash in a state of Chorban, Omer, Beis Kadshenu B'tif Artenu, Asher Hilucha Avosinu, Hayu L'Sreifas Eish, V'chol Machmadenu Hayu L'Charva. So we say the pasuk. Also, again, all of us is in Yeshayahu. Literally, again, the house of our holiness and our grandeur that our forefathers praised you in has been burnt. All of our beauty has become desolate, and one tears kriya. And I will say, you should just point out, these lines are actually codified in the Shulchan Aruch. That Allah Chalamaysevi contemporarily, person sees the cities of Yehuda in a state of destruction, person sees Yerushalayim in a state of destruction, person sees the Beis Hamikdash in a state of destruction. Ultimately, again, one is obligated to create. I will say, it's important to understand, after 1967, people came to Rabbi Soloveitchik and they said, we should stop saying Nachem. On Tisha B'Av afternoon, we insert a paragraph in Shemona Esrei called Nachem. And in Nachem, we speak about Yerushalayim Habezuya, Mibli Baneha. Yerushalayim has no one there, and it's degraded. And they came to the Rav, and they said, we should take it out. Baruch Hashem, we have Yerushalayim again. And Rabbi Soloveitchik said something so profound. He said, we have Yerushalayim again. But it's important to understand that the Yerushalayim of today doesn't hold a candle to what Yerushalayim was and what Yerushalayim will be. See, I will say, we go to Yerushalayim today. It's great schos, just to be there last week. And you look around, and it's incredible to see. It's incredible to see. I'll just tell you, I remember when I was there Chanukah time, so every night in Mamila, they had a Chabad does a beautiful hadlaka there, like a big menorah, and they have like music there, every night. And I remember I went every night with my family that we were there. And when you look, if you've ever been to Mamila, so it's like a what's the word? Plaza. What is it? Is that what you call a plaza? Okay. And I'll say literally again, the entire plaza was packed with Jews. From as far as the eye could see, the whole way down, it was packed. It was packed. And I'll tell you, I remember I think it was Gad Elbaz was there. And literally, mamish, I just started crying. So my daughter said to me, Tati, I didn't realize you like Gad Elbaz that much. I said, I never heard of Gad Elbaz until like 3 minutes ago. Right? But you see it, and you see what Yerushalayim is today, and you see it for a moment, you could see what Mashiach is. You could feel it. Am Yisrael convulsing, converging in one place. But it's important for us to understand that as much as we have today more than generations for the last 2,000 years, it's not yet what it should be. It's not yet where it needs to be. So therefore, again, Yerushalayim is still in a state of Churban. The Beis HaMikdash is still in a state of Churban. As magnificent and as wonderful, as incredible as it is, it's not yet what Emir Hashem it will be. And that's how the Shulchan Aruch codifies this lahalacha. Person sees Ari Yehuda, ter kriya. Person sees Yerushalayim, ter kriya. A person sees the Makom HaMikdash, ter kriya. Now, I'll just mention, when it comes to the Makom HaMikdash, like a person goes to the Kosel today, tearing kriya, so I'll just point out, so the Shulchan Aruch paskins halacha l'maisa, one should tear kriya. When one goes to the Kosel the first time, especially if they have not been there in 30 days, one tears kriya. There is an interesting position of Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kohen Cook, Zechariah who holds that the din of Ari Yehuda Yerushalayim Beis Hamikdash Becharbana, he holds, is a din in riboniyut, is a din in ownership. In other words, when do you have to tear kriya? When there's no Jewish autonomy. But he held that when there is Jewish autonomy over the site, it's no longer called Bechurbana, which is a very interesting idea, because Har HaBayis is Jewish autonomy, right? Yerushalayim is Jewish autonomy. Ari Yehuda, at least most of it, is Jewish autonomy. So it is interesting to see that even contemporarily, whether one is obligated to do kriya at these sites is interesting. But again, Shulchan Aruch paskins like this Gemara, that literally we tear kriya at the Kosel, in Yerushalayim, Ari Yehuda, and again, when one tears kriya, one recites these psukim that are mentioned over here in the Gemara. Quite incredible. What's that good? Korei ala mikdash umosef ala Yerushalayim. So you tear for the Beis HaMikdash, and you could add on to the same tear for Yerushalayim, or minhu. So whether you go ahead and you hear about the Churban, let's say you were living during the times of the Churban, or you saw the Churban, kevan she'egil et sofim korea. So when you get to Tzofim, there's a machlokas, if Tzofim is a place, or Tzofim is any place from which you could see the Har HaBayis, the Mikdash. You go ahead and you tear the Korei al-Mikdash v'fnei atzmo v'Yishlaim v'fnei atzmo. And I will say ultimately again, you tear for the Mikdash by itself, and for Yerushalayim by itself, two different tears. That contradicts what we just said, because before we just said that halacha l'maisa, you could tear for the Mikdash and just extend the tear for Yerushalayim. No kashya, had the paga b'Mikdash b'reisha, had the paga b'Yerushalayim b'reisha. We'll say everything depends. What are you encountering first? If you first see the Mikdash and then you see Yerushalayim, you tear for the Makom HaMikdash and then you extend the tear for Yerushalayim. If you first see Yerushalayim, you tear, and then you have to make a separate tear for the Beis HaMikdash. So you'll say to yourself, how can you see the Mikdash first before Yerushalayim? So Rashi says, imagine you travel in a covered wagon. So you don't see Yerushalayim. The first thing you see is the Har HaBayis, is the Makom HaMikdash. Good. So the Gemara says, Tan Rabbanan v'kulan Rashan l'sholalan u'lamolalan u'lalotan v'lazosakim in sulamos avalo la'achosan. They both say all of these tears that we've discussed, you could do any type of temporary mending, but you can't permanently fix it. I will say, achosan ma'acha means to permanently mend something. Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Dezu, will say, u'be'echui Alexandri. What are we talking about over here? I will say, what's an example of a permanent mend? An Alexandrian stitch. The Alexandrian stitch, I will say, was considered to be like the mother of all stitching. Tanabanan hakorea mitoch hashalol mitoch hamala mitoch haleker mitoch hasulamos lo yatsa mitoch haichui yatsa. Both say, listen to this. If you had a garment that was stitched up with any of these temporary stitchings, and then let's say you had to tear kriya and you tore the stitching, you're not yotzei kriya. But if you had permanently stitched up a garment and you tear that again, then ultimately you're yotzei kriya with that, which I will say makes sense. In other words, this form of permanent sewing that the Gemara is calling ichui essentially makes the garment whole again, makes it whole. So for any of these tears that we spoke about, you can't do ichui, but if you did have a garment that was restitched with ichui and you tore it again, you would be yotzei kriya. Amar Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda said as follows, Ubi ichui Alexandri, go Tan Rabbanan. Rashay lahov cholamat olachoso. I will say if you tore a garment, and let's say it's the kind of tear that you're not permitted to mend. A good example of that would be parents. What can you do? Right? What can you do? You could turn the garment upside down. I will say, if you imagine for a moment, I guess if let's say you have like a tunic or a robe, right? So you tore by the neck. What you could do is you could go ahead and turn it upside down. Essentially, go ahead and open up, and better like a poncho, if you could imagine, right? So you could go ahead and essentially take the bottom, sew it up, make it into a neck, open up the bottom, and essentially then you could re-stitch the tear since it is now the bottom of the garment. Rabbi Shimon Elazar osar la'achoso. Shimon Elazar says, no, you're not allowed to permanently stitch. The Geshem Shamocher asar la'achoso was very interesting. And the same way that you, the owner of the garment, are not permitted to stitch it up, kach halokeach asar la'achoso. There was actually a fascinating halacha, which is that if you tore kriya on a garment, let's say a person, Reuven lost his father, right? So he tore kriya on the garment. And now what happened? He loosely stitched it up, which is okay, right? Afterwards, he sells the garment. He has to tell the person, by the way, you're not allowed to restitch the garment. The din of kriya, interestingly enough, the inability to sew up the tear for a parent is a din in the cheftz and not a din in the gavra, right? It's a din in the garment, not a din in the person. So the garment itself can never be restitched. So even if you sell that garment, you have to tell the purchaser that it cannot be restitched. Therefore, again, the seller has to tell the purchaser. Tan Rabbanon, tchilas kriya tefach v'tosefes shalosh etzbos Rebbeir. Rebbeir says, when you tear kriya, you have to tear at least a tefach, one tefach. Now, and interestingly enough, let's say a person lost a relative, he tore kriya. Let's say then he lost another relative. Rabbi Meir says you can go ahead and extend the same tear for another kriya, subsequent kriya, and that subsequent kriya only has to be 3 finger breadths. That's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Huda Omer tchilas kriya shalosh etzbos. Rabbi Huda says no. An initial kriya only has to be 3 finger breadths. Vitosefes kolshu, and when adding on for another loss, you only have to add on a very small amount, any amount. Amar Ula says, halacha k'Remeir b'kriya, the halacha follows Rabbi Meir b'kriya, namely that halacha l'maisi you have to tear at least the tefach. V'halacha Rabbi Huda b'tosefes. But if you lost another relative after you made the first tear, all you need to do is what? Add on just a little bit for the second tear. Taina Rabbi Hachi Rabbi that supports this. Rabbi Yossi says, tchilas kriya tefach. When you tear for a relative initially, the tear has to be a tefach. That's how we pass halacha l'maisa. The tear has to be a tefach, right? The length of a fist. But chas from a person endures another loss, they only have to extend the tear by a little bit. Tan Rabbanan, Amrulo meis aviv v'kara. They tell a person, your father passed away, and he went ahead and he tore kriya. And then Meis Bino, and then Chasham, his son, passed away afterwards. Vahosif, and then he added on to that tear. What's the halacha? Tachton misacha, elyon eno misacha. The lower tear. Rabbi say, what's the lower tear? The lower tear was the additional amount that he tore for his son. That amount, that lower tear can be mended, because one is permitted to mend the tear for a child. Elyon eno misacha. But the upper tear, which was the one he made for the parent, cannot be mended. Conversely, Meis Bino V'Kara, a person lost his child, lost his son, and he tore kriya. Umeis Aviv, and then ultimately his father died. V'Hosif, and then he added on to the tear. Elyon Misacha, the upper tear, which was the one he made for his son, can be mended. Tachton Eino Misacha, but the lower one for his father cannot be mended. Meis Aviv, Meis Imo, Meis Achiv, Meis Achoso, Korea Kera Echalakulan. Halach l'maisa also, if a person endured multiple losses at one point in time, in one moment, chas v'shalom, he can make one kriya for all of those relatives. We'll stop over here for today. We'll say, don't get nervous. We are right on track. Because remember, again, the last daf of we have Tuesday, Wednesday. The last daf is Thursday, and you can see Thursday is only Chav Tesmav, only a couple of lines. So we are perfect. This is all premeditated. I thought this all through beforehand. Right? We are fine in Meretz Hashem. Shkayach, looking forward to a beautiful daf tomorrow.